Chapter 6. Buttondown, Indiana received township on April 1st, 1897. April Fool's Day. Up to that time, it was mostly just an Indian territory. The town founder, Mr. Thomas Button, was an industrialist who saw the territory as a perfect place to build a grain mill. Within 6 months, Buttondown Industries was up and running on the west bank of the Chesapeake River. The rich soils of the area proved to be a boon for the industry. Within a year, 3,000 people inhabited the city. Within 5 years, the city had a bank, a schoolhouse, a general store, a church, and a jailhouse. During the First World War, the town saw a major boon as Buttondown Industries won a contract to supply grain to the entire war effort. Yes, times were good in the early century. Then came the Great Depression. As with many other startup communities during the mass production boom, Buttondown barely survived, if you could call it that. As the mill began laying off employees, the town population shrunk. At a height of 17,300 in 1935, by 1940 it was down to 7,000. Unlike many cities in America that was revitalized by the Second World War, Buttondown was nearly destroyed. Believing that because the mill had been given the contract during the First World War, Mr. Button convinced everyone in town that the mill would be guaranteed the contract again. When the bid was lost, Mr. Button was found the next day, hanging by a rope from his favorite tree, just down the road from the grain mill, next to the river with a note in his pocket that simply read, "I'm sorry, Buttondown." For many years his wife and then his sons hung on to the mill, but it never recaptured the glory it once had. And on July 4th, 1978, the mill closed its doors forever. I used to love to sit on the knee of my great-grandfather when I was a child, and he would tell me the glory days of the town. Buttondown in my childhood was very different from that of his. Much like the people that inhabited the town, Buttondown was a ghost of its former self. I guess you could say it entered the Depression but never left. "Tommy, where in the hell were you?" I asked.
While you were in Miss Lubbock's getting your caramels, I was just standing on the sidewalk waiting like I always did. Then something caught my eye. Something was in her backyard. It moved really fast from one side to the other. And man, I'm not shitting you, it was tall. I'm talking like 8 feet tall. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it had glowing eyes.
"Yellow glowing eyes?" I responded.
Yeah, how did you know?
As I started to explain all that had happened, Chuck chimed in with, "Hey loser, why'd you hit me?" Just as Tommy was about to speak, we heard a terrifying cry off in the distance. Immediately, Grandpa knew what it was. It was Deputy Jones. He had disappeared. Grandpa yelled, "Greg, where are you?" All we could hear was a faint and then nothing. "Get in the car!" Grandpa screamed. "We gotta get the hell out of here!" We all ran for the car as he opened the doors. We all landed on each other as we jumped in. "I'm going to look for Greg," he said. "But I need to get you kids home first." Realizing we had all lived in different places, he told us he was going to take us all to my house. It was the closest after all. Grandpa started up the engine of that good old solid V6-4 and threw her in first gear, then into second. Then he was about to hit third when the creature leaped from the side of the road and hit the side of the car so hard, Grandpa lost control and drove off the side of the road and hit a tree. As we all came to our senses, I looked into the front seat. Grandpa was out cold and he had blood running from the side of his head profusely. Just at that moment, a sharp pain developed in my head and my brain felt like it was going to explode. I slipped out of consciousness as my friends all screamed and yelled my name. I woke again briefly to the sounds of the beast howling and the car shaking wildly. Then I passed out again. The next memory is that of only sounds and senses. It felt as if I was being dragged along through a rough ground. Opening my eyes hurt like hell, and I knew I didn't want to, but I had to. Kind of like ripping off a Band-Aid. As my eyes adjusted, I realized I was in a building, a giant building. Only one building that giant was around. I was in the abandoned mill. There was a huge fire in the middle of the room, highlighting the terrifying nature of the scene. This was the production area of the mill. Broken down ovens and grinders littered the room, remnants of better days. As I looked at the far end, just below the giant picture of the company founder, Mr. Buttons, I could see a man standing against an oven. He shouted, "Oh good, you're awake!" As he walked toward me, I could tell he was a stranger. I'd never seen him before. His clothes were tattered and unkempt, his hair was uncut, and he was unshaven. He asked, "Do you know why you're here?" I said, "No." "Do you know this boy?" he asked as he pulled Tommy from the dark and plopped him in front of himself. I said, "That's my best friend, Tommy." He looked down at Tommy and let out a devilish laugh. "Really?" he said. "And how long have you known Tommy?" "2 years, I said. He replied, "Well then, you don't really know him at all." When he said this, I began to black out again. As my eyes grew heavier, I noticed the man starting to change. He started taking off his clothes as his body grew bigger. He also began to scream in agony as he writhed the back. He fell flat on the ground and turned over on his back. At this point, he grew fangs and paws and lots of fur. As he rolled over into an upright position, he got up on his hind legs and let out a scream. He then grabbed Tommy and looked at me with those glowing yellow eyes. I was almost out again. I could barely make out Tommy as he was being torn apart as he screamed. I tried to scream, but I could only let out a brief whisper. "Tommy." Oh, hi, how you guys doing? Welcome to Q&J Entertainment Studios. And one thing that we would like to let everybody know is a lot of people out there think that our videos are a little rigid. We think they're pretty darn funny, but we've realized maybe, just maybe, some things get lost in the translation. So, with our creepypasta that we've just put out, check out this video. Tommy! Where the hell were you?
While you were in Miss Lubbock's getting your caramels, I was just standing on the sidewalk waiting like I always did. Then something caught my eye. Something was in her backyard. It moved really fast from one side to the other. And man, I'm not shitting you. It was tall. I'm talking like 8 feet tall. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it had glowing eyes.
Yellow glowing eyes?
Yeah, how did you know?
As I started to explain all that had happened, Chuck chimed in with, "Hey, look, Jake! Why did you hit me?" Just as Tommy was about to speak, we heard a terrifying cry off in the distance. Immediately, Grandpa knew what it was. It was Deputy Joe. It's not Deputy Joe. No. Not Deputy. But he disappeared. Grandpa yelled, Greg! Greg, where are you? All he could hear was a faint voice. Please, Craig, don't. I don't know where. Get in the car! Grandpa screamed, we gotta get the hell out of here! We all ran for the car. We opened the door. We landed on top of each other. I'm going to look for Greg, Grandpa said. I need to get over. Realizing we all lived in different places, he told us that he was going to take us all to my house. That was a good plan. It was the closest house, you see. Grandpa started up that engine. It was that good old solid V6 Ford. He threw her in first gear. Woo! He pulled her down in a second. Ah! Right when he was going for a third. Woo! The creature hit the side of the freaking car. Knocked us off the road. We hit a freaking tree. As we all came to our senses, I looked into the front seat. Grandpa was out cold, and he had blood running down the side of his head profusely. But at that moment, I had a sharp pain develop in my brain. I felt like I was going to explode. I slipped out of consciousness, and all the kids were screaming, "Yeah! Yeah!" I woke again briefly to the sounds of the beast howling and the car shaking. Wow!